Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of the PETHS Alumni Network podcast. I'm your host, Nathan, and today we are joined by Nick Cheng. How are you doing?
I'm good. How you doing, Nathan?
I'm good. Thank you so much for being on here today. We know you're busy with other things, which we'll get to later. To give a quick introduction, you graduated in 2019 from PET. You then went on to study kinesiology at York, and then now you're in your master's program for kinesiology, also at York. So let's hop right into it. We talked a little bit offline. You said you've obviously grown a lot since high school.
Yeah.
That's the sense that I'm getting. You mentioned that you were at Create back in the day. What are some other standout experiences that you remember from your time at PET?
Yeah. So I kind of mentioned this to you. I mentioned this to you before, but compared to the other alumni you've had on this podcast, like I'm not the most accomplished high school student, I will say. So when I was in high school, I wasn't the best student, I guess. So I didn't really do much extracurriculars. I wasn't the most athletic, so I wasn't really on any sports teams. The one thing I did like outside of school, I guess, was create, like I mentioned. So I did that in grade 12. That was pretty fun. It was a pretty cool experience, and I think I should have been involved a little bit more earlier in high school. So if there's any like other like current high school students right now, definitely get involved. Yeah, in high school, I wasn't the best student per se. Like I didn't do a lot of extracurriculars. Actually, I wasn't a good student either. So just like a funny story is that like when I applied to schools, I had like 5 schools I applied to. I think that's like the amount you can apply to. That's like under like a package or something. So my first choice, I really wanted to go to Waterloo. So all my friends know I really wanted to go to Waterloo Kin. I applied out some other schools like Western, McMaster, Queens, and York. And I didn't get into Waterloo. I didn't get to any of those schools. So my friends still call me to this day, like, oh, Nick didn't get to Waterloo Kin. So York is actually the only school that accepted me just because my grades were not the best. So, high school, I definitely would suggest, if there's any current students watching, definitely work hard in high school so you can, have more options when applying to university, and getting involved is pretty cool. I did a lot of that in my undergrad, so definitely suggest getting involved. But some high school like memories or things that really stood out. Just like, I guess, aside from academics, like I think PET's like a really great school, a lot of great teachers there. I think like a standout moment for me was like prom. So in 2019, when I was in high school, it was the day that Raptors also won the championship too. So I'm really into basketball, so that was a really big day too. And yeah, prom was just really fun. It's something everyone was looking forward to. So that's probably like the biggest moment that like stood out to me in high school. If we're talking like academics aside, yeah.
Yeah. So you touched on applying to kinesiology, and I'm curious, like, at what point did you know that you wanted to go into kinesiology?
Yeah. So actually, when I was I think it was grade 10, we were talking about, it was like in careers, and we had to talk about like getting to university and like what course you want to take in like grade 11, grade 12, academic or applied type of stuff. And honestly, I didn't really know what I wanted to do going into university. I didn't know, I'm like a older sibling, so I don't really have any like older siblings I can like rely on or any older friends. So I didn't really know what to do. But one of my friends was telling me like, oh, Nick, like, what do you like to do? And I like, oh, I love playing sports. I love playing basketball. And they're like, oh, what about studying kinesiology? And I was like, I didn't know what that was at the time. I was like, I don't even know what that means. And it's like, oh, it's kind of like the study of like exercise basically. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And so I looked at the requirements and I took all the courses I needed for grade 11 and grade 12. And then, yeah, that's why I decided to pursue kinesiology, just because I really love exercise. So I love playing basketball. Basketball is a sport I loved playing. I wasn't the best. I didn't make it on any teams, but I loved basketball. I loved exercising, and I loved learning how to get better because I sucked. So yeah, that's why I wanted to study kinesiology. I just wanted to like learn how to improve like human performance. And yeah, I just love exercise, and like I also love going to the gym too to get better. So I was like, like my parents always told me to pursue my passion, so that's why I ended up studying kinesiology, because I just love exercise and I love sports. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And now you find yourself at York. You talked about the culture at PET. You say it's a great school and great teachers. Was there almost like a culture shock for you when you first went to York?
Yeah, I think there was. So I think one thing is PET's in Markham. So, and I'm Asian, so there's a lot of Asians in at PET. But I think York is very multicultural. So I think going to York was definitely a little bit of a culture shock for me. I think not being around like so many Asians is a little bit different. But I think it's a little bit different. I think like it's kind of like the stereotype. Like it's not that hard to get into York. So I know PET, like a lot of like I wasn't the most studious, but a lot of my friends were. So coming to York, like I noticed a lot of people like didn't really care too much about school. They just kind of like hanging out, doing whatever. But then yeah, for me, like I tried to make friends that cared about school. So I wanted to try like change that up. I was like, if I surround myself around people who, who care about their academics, who care about their future, hopefully that can like kind of rub onto me. So I surrounded myself with some good friends here at York that actually cared about, doing well in school and not just fooling around and stuff. And so, yeah, I definitely think it was a culture shock, but I think it's just at the end of the day, it's like the people you surround yourself with, right? So even though the culture is a little bit different here, there are still people who like care a lot about their academics and want to do well and like go to professional school. I have some friends who are in med school now, nursing and physiotherapy. So yeah, I do think it was a culture shock, but at the end of the day, I think it worked. I really enjoy it here at York, and like it's like a second home to me now.
So offline, before we got on this call a little bit, we were talking, and you said that you wanted to, be more involved in, your school community. Can you tell us about, some of the extracurriculars that you're involved in now?
Yeah. So when I was in my second year, I decided to, join a club. That's something I never did in high school, so it's a little bit different for me. And like it was also COVID, so I wanted to, meet some new friends and meet some people who were like, really wanted to do something with their degree and stuff. And so I joined the club here at York. It's called CASO, which stands for Kinesiology and Health Science Student Organization. And yeah, I really wanted to be a teacher coming out of high school. Like I really love teaching and I always wanted to be a teacher. So I applied for like the peer tutor position. So I was like helping students and tutoring them on courses I took before. And you need to have like good grades in it. So I tried making sure my grades were good in undergrad so I could actually be a peer tutor and teach other students. So I did that for 2 years. And then I also did a work study position called PETHS, which stands for Peer Assisted Study Session. So basically, I took Physiology 1 and Physiology 2 in my second year, and I did well in it. And it's a historically really challenging course, and a lot of students do bad in it. So that course has a PASS leader, and they basically host these study sessions and like go through questions with students, help them with difficult concepts, and we prep like practice exams as well. And so I did that for 2 years, and you make connections with the profs because you have to attend class, like you're paid to go to class. And like it's a work study position, so I get paid to host these study sessions as well. So I did that in my undergrad. So that was 2 of the things I did to get involved in my community. I also did a certificate program here in my undergrad. It's the Fitness Assessment and Exercise Counseling Certificate. And so when you do that program, you get your personal training certificate and your exercise physiologist certificate. So through that program, I got to have a job as an occupational exercise physiologist. So what that basically does is like we work with jobs that have fitness requirements. So firefighters, for example, like in order to do the job, you need to be fit enough to like open doors, break through doors, climb ladders, carry hose like up and down stairs. So we had that. And basically what we do is like we test firefighters VO2 max, we test their strength, their endurance, and they have to meet a certain fitness requirement in order to get the job. So those are some of like the extracurriculars and work study jobs and jobs I had while I was in my undergrad. And I also did research as well. I was in a vascular research lab in my undergrad as well. So I got to make connections with different grad students as well. So I definitely got involved, and I have a really good community here because I did 2 years with my club and 2 years as a PASS leader. So I made a lot of connections with students, and yeah, that's why I really enjoy York now, because like I've made a lot of these really strong connections here, and like I decided to come back here for my master's just because my undergrad got cut off because of COVID. So I was like, I'll stay here another 2 years and like foster these connections I have with these profs and with these students and with these grad students as well.
Yeah, I'd love to hear the involvement, and we were talking a little bit offline about respecting and appreciating these first line workers. We really saw that during COVID. It was a huge thing, and it's great what you're doing. And you mentioned that you're in your master's now at York. At what point did you really know that you were going to do your master's? And we'll touch on a little bit your future plans, but at what point did you really know you wanted further education going forward?
Yeah, so like I kind of mentioned before, like when I was in high school, I really wanted to be a teacher. And so I really enjoyed teaching and like, guiding students through life and teaching them about like kinesiology and biology. And so I came into York wanting to be a teacher and going into their teachers college program. But it was in my second year that I started appreciating research, and I started realizing that, university is built on these professors and the research that they do. And that's how we learn things, right? Is through research. And my friends introduced me to like some of these fitness YouTubers that are like exercise, like that are like evidence-based. So like, I don't know if you know like Jeff Nippert. Have you heard of him before? Yeah. So like he does a lot of like science-based like exercise, right? And I was like, oh, I didn't know, like, I thought working out was just like, hitting the gym, going hard, but there's actually like this little niche where people like actually do science on it and figuring out how to exercise most optimally. And that's kind of my passion because like, I was never good at sports. I was never good at lifting. I was never the strongest. And so I thought research was really cool, and I really wanted to learn more and dive deeper into exercise because I loved learning about exercise, and it's like my passion. And so I realized, like, how can I like join my two passions together, right? Like I love teaching, I love working with students, and I also love doing research. And I was like, oh, a professor does both, right? They like lecture in classes, they have their own grad students that they mentor, and they also conduct research. And I was like, okay, that kind of like blends both of my passions together. And so I was like, you know what, like when you do a master's, you get funding, and most of that funding comes from being a TA. And so, I have to teach courses. I'm also taking more advanced courses, so I get to dive deeper into the stuff I love. And I have my own research project now, so it blends all my passions together, pursuing a master's, and then I eventually like want to do a PhD and then become a professor. So I'll just be doing research and teaching basically, hopefully for the rest of my career. And I love it, honestly. Like I love it so far, and it's been a great experience.
That's inspirational stuff. If you were to like look back at your undergrad, career, those 4 years, what was like the biggest thing that you take with you from those 4 years to your postgrad degree right now?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of like the purpose of this podcast and like this Instagram page and this following you've built, like this like networking, I think is very important. I think it's the biggest thing I can take away from my undergrad is I made a lot of connections with students, like tutoring them and leading these study sessions and hosting these like review sessions for exams. I got to make these really good connections with students, and some of them are friends to this day actually. So I got to make connections there. I got to meet grad students, and they kind of mentored me through the whole application process as well. And they've mentored me throughout the whole research process, teaching me like how to do stats, how to do certain wet lab techniques. And so they've taught me that a lot as well. And like I made connections with a lot of professors here. So, I did the certificate program, so I made connections with that prof. I also did a thesis project in my undergrad. And so those two profs ended up being my reference letters for graduate school. And they're still here at York. So like I still see them and I still say hi to them and we talk sometimes. And then now I'm in graduate school with this other professor as well. And we're researching nutrition and exercise physiology. And so I think if it wasn't for me building all these connections, I don't think I would be here at this day. And like at the end of the day, like any job requires, networking and making connections with people. So I think undergrad at York has taught me a lot because it's a commuter school. So a lot of people here, they go to school and they just dip and they go home. But like I really had to like make an effort to make connections with these people because I know like that's kind of like the culture here at York. So yeah, I think the connections really helped get me to where I am now. And like, meeting the supervisor, getting a job here, and then connecting with professors in my past job, and then them being my reference letters to get into graduate school. And they're my reference letters for like scholarship applications as well. So, strong reference letters are always important for any postgraduate program you're trying to apply to. So, obviously having a good social life. So making connections, making friends here. So yeah, I definitely think my biggest takeaway throughout my 4 years is like networking and meeting people and fostering these connections.
Do you have any like tips, especially when it comes to people who might not be like on the same level, like, a professor or supervisor? Do you have any tips for really like connecting and building a good relationship with them?
Yeah, so I think different professors have different research interests. So it kind of depends. So for me, I love exercise, and not everyone in kin does exercise. Some people do like more molecular stuff, but I think first off, like sitting at the front of the class, like as cliche as that sounds, like if you sit at the front and you ask them questions, that they'll recognize you, like, oh, that's the kid who sits at the front. And I think like volunteering in their labs, like research might not be the most interesting, but if you can find a prof that has similar research interests to you, like you could be really into like nutrition, and you can probably find a prof in kin who's into nutrition. Or if you're like a science student, if you're like looking at like the certain cell type, you can probably find a prof who likes that stuff as well. And you could like ask the volunteer in the lab, learn how they learn these things and like learn their research techniques. And if you're in their lab actually working with them, like they can see this connection, like, oh, the student really cares and the student really loves this stuff. So it's easy for you to make connections in that way. But I think if you're not into research, definitely the easiest way is just like sitting at the front of class and like going up to them every class and asking a question. Like if you're really paying attention, you're bound to have some questions. So going up to them, not being shy, introducing yourself, like, oh, my name is Nick, and like I really love your class. I just have this one question about this, and like every time just constantly going up to them and talking to them I think is a great way to make a connection. But yeah.
Right. It sounds like you've had, very respectable, great professors throughout your studies so far. And you mentioned that you want to become a prof one day.
Yeah.
Are there certain like mannerism skills that you really want to emulate when you become a prof?
Yeah. So, okay. So a few things. So I've worked with a few different profs. So in my undergrad, I was working with this professor named Dr. Tara Haas. And one thing I really liked is that she came to school every single day. So if you know some profs, they come to school to teach, and then they can do a lot of their stuff at home because their grad students are in the lab working. So my prof in my undergrad, she came to school every single day, was in her office from like 9 to 5 every single day. And she always had her door open. So, you know, it's like the body language that you can come and ask questions anytime. So we didn't have any meetings, but anytime I was in the lab and had questions, I'd just go to her and ask her questions. So when I become a prof, I hopefully want to, you know, come to school every day, have my door open, and just always be open for students to come and ask questions. So that's one thing I took away from my undergrad. Um, and right now, my supervisor right now, her name is Dr. Andrea Joss, and she's like really kind and really supportive. She doesn't come to school every day, but she's always like willing to like set up meetings online, and she's always like willing to help. So I had this one situation where like I was dealing with this really difficult student, and I was really stressed, and she was on vacation. Like it was her first day on vacation, and I was like so stressed. I didn't know how to deal with this one student, and so I just like messaged her. Like I have her number, so I just texted her. I was like, oh, like, do you think we can meet really quickly? Because I'm really stressed about the situation. And like she dropped everything to help me right away. And so one thing I want to do is like always be there for my students. So if they ever need any support, I'll always be there to support them. And she always gives me opportunities. Like I'm a first year, and she's giving me a lot of opportunities already. I'm writing this research paper with her right now. It's a review paper. So I think for me, it's just like, you know, giving students lots of opportunities and, you know, always having my door open to asking questions, because I love that mentoring aspect of teaching and being a prof, you know?
So, you know, we've talked about, you know, you becoming a professor. You know, at this point, are you just going to stay at York, you know, do all your years there, or are you looking to branch out somewhere else? What's the plan right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I really love it here at York. Like I'm someone who like really loves being comfortable. So, but one thing in academia is like they always encourage you to go to different schools. So being here at York, like yeah, if I stayed from a PhD in the same lab, like I'd learn a little bit more techniques. But at the end of the day, like there's only so much I can learn being in one lab, right? And so that's something I'm still debating and still thinking over, because my professor right now is really nice, and she's already talking about like potential PhD projects. There's like this training study she wants to do where we're like actually like putting them through a training program and potentially seeing some differences there. So there's some really interesting stuff that makes me want to stay here. But one technique I really want to learn is this technique called a muscle biopsy. So basically what they do is like you put participants through an intervention, and then you basically like freeze their leg, make an incision in their leg, and you put this like Bergstrom needle and you just put it in the muscle and you snip some of their muscle out, and then you can extract it and analyze their muscle and look at it molecularly. So that's something one of the senior PhD students in my lab is doing right now, and like I've seen the process; it's really cool. So I eventually want to learn that technique, and there's a few profs who know how to do it. Like at McMaster, there's a prof. His name is Dr. Stu Phillips. He's the one who like was my supervisor. So he's like he knows this stuff, and he's like the lead researcher in protein and exercise. And there's one at U of T. His name is Dan Moore. He also does muscle biopsies. So I really want to learn that technique. So potentially, you know, maybe going to McMaster, U of T for my PhD is probably the best, but still something I'm still debating and working out. But yeah, like I want to try moving out and like experiencing a different school, different lab culture, and learning some different techniques too. But I'm not opposed to staying here if it makes sense for my career. So we'll see when that time comes.
So for the muscle biopsy, is it for like injuries, or is it for like cancer, or like what like applications does it have?
Yeah, so basically the muscle biopsy is so let's say like so right now what I'm doing for my study is the main outcome we're looking at is blood biomarkers. So we put them through an intervention. So right now we're putting them through like an acute exercise bout. So I'm the personal trainer on the study, so I put them through like a high intensity exercise session, and they bring them back to the lab. And we do venipuncture. So we take their blood, and then at the end of the study, I'm going to look at the bone biomarkers. So the main measure is in the blood, but I really want to look at stuff in the muscle. So I won't be able to know any changes in the muscle because we're taking it from the blood. So it's only circulating factors in the blood that I can analyze. But if you take something directly from the muscle, like let's say I'm doing a training intervention, I can see like whether a protein is like expressed great, well, like is increased, or if it's like if the content has like either gone up or gone down, and I can look at it more molecularly, right? So it's not really like a treatment; it's more so like a measure of an intervention. So rather than looking at like the whole body, I can look really molecularly and look at the protein level or even the gene expression level as well. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Sorry, I don't have a science background, so I
yeah. Don't worry.
How that stuff. Yeah, I have no idea how that stuff works. Like, is it specific to like a muscle group that you're focusing on, or is it like whole body?
Yeah. So for muscle biopsies, it's typically taken in the quad. But I know some muscle biopsies you can take in the tricep as well. But you typically look at changes in the quad just because it's like I actually don't know the reason why they take it in the quad, but most of the studies that are done in the literature are done in the quad. So it's just kind of looking at like because we can't take whole body. It's really hard for humans like making multiple incisions in the body to look at changes in the chest muscle, changes in the quad muscle. So we typically take it in one, and like it's a really expensive procedure, and like you have to pay participants a lot because it's really invasive. So in my lab mate study, like he pays participants like $400 to do muscle biopsies through an intervention. So it's pretty expensive. So we can only take a few samples at a time, but it's a technique that would make me really special if I want to apply for an academic position, right? I can be like, oh yeah, like I know I do this surgical procedure to extract muscle and analyze it. So that's eventually something I want to do in my PhD. And it's a really cool way you can do a lot of wet lab techniques and really dig deep in the mechanisms that we see in the muscle and changes in the muscle.
So, one underlying theme that I've kind of seen, and one thing I really admire is that, you mentioned that, you really, in your words, you weren't the greatest student.
Yeah.
And, now you want to pursue, farther academia, you want to work in academia, you want to become a professor. What can you kind of say about the importance of kind of that growth and like almost like turning over a new leaf for you?
Yeah, I think one thing is definitely like don't think just because you're a bad student that you can't change, and like, oh, because you didn't do good in high school, like you're bound to fail in life. Like I think it's a really bad expectation that society has that, in high school you should get everything figured out. Like I didn't even really know how to study in high school. Like I didn't know like how to like actually learn in high school properly. Not because of the teachers there. I think the teachers at Pet were great. I think it was just a me thing, but I definitely think like I think it's never too late for anything. So I think that's probably like something I would take away is that like even in undergrad, if you do really bad in undergrad and let's say you want to pursue med school, like don't think it's too late. You can like take courses again to improve your GPA. You can get more involved. A lot of people, I have like this one lab mate. He finished his undergrad and he's like 3 years out of his undergrad. And each year he's been applying to med school and he hasn't been getting in and he's still pursuing it, right? So I think like at the end of the day, like if it's something you really want, don't think it's ever too late. You can always work towards it. So, for me, like I didn't really get into like any universities other than York. And I was like, okay, like I don't want that feeling of rejection again when I apply to grad school. Or in that case, I want to be a teacher. So I didn't want that feeling of rejection when I applied to teachers college. So I worked really hard. And I think like as long as you put your mind to it, put your head down and work really hard and just work for what you enjoy and your passions, I think you can really accomplish anything. So that's kind of like the mindset I have right now is that like, in academia, it's really hard. There's only like a few universities, right? In Toronto, and like it's very competitive. There's a lot of people with PhDs. And so for me, I just kind of like have that mentality that, like just gotta work as hard as I can and try my best. And, if I don't get an academic position like a few years out of my PhD, I'm gonna keep trying, because it's something I enjoy. So yeah, I think like for sure, like throughout this journey, like something I take away is, just don't give up. And like if it's something you enjoy, just keep pushing towards it, and just for sure finding something you enjoy. Like don't push towards something you don't enjoy. Like just because your parents want you to go to med school or go to law school or go to like some really top tier school like Harvard, like it's going to be hard if you don't enjoy something. So find your passions and just really push towards your passions,
I love those words. Those are great, inspiring words for the rest of us. You mentioned like kind of the scarcity of, these programs and, these schools. What were some of the like things that, helped you stand out in your application for your master's and, some tips that you're trying to keep in mind for your application for your PhD?
Yeah, so I think it depends depending on the school you apply to. So like physio schools have different requirements, med schools have different requirements. I'll just speak on my own experience applying to graduate school. So one thing I know is that graduate school is like when you're applying for a master's, there's either a research-based master's or a course-based master's. So I want to go on the research-based master's. So I think having some undergrad research experience is really valuable. So I started early. So I started doing a research project in my second year. It was like a financial wellness project. It wasn't anything to do with kinesiology. It was just a project I decided to join. In my third year, I was volunteering in a lab. And then my fourth year, I did a thesis project. And so I had a lot of research experience coming out of my undergrad. And my supervisor really liked that. She said when she was like at my application, she's like, oh, like I know like Nick has like research experience and it's going to be an easy transition for him as well. I also did a lot of wet lab stuff. So I did a lot of molecular biology techniques in my lab. So I did histochemistry, which is basically staining muscle tissue and like looking under a microscope, basically. So I had some wet lab experience. So she really liked that I had that wet lab experience. And because I expanded my skills, I also had my personal training and exercise physiologist certification. So right now we have an exercise study and she needed a personal trainer on our team as well. So she's like, oh, Nick can do personal training. Nick also has research experience. Nick has great references and my GPA was solid too. And so those are kind of the like main pushing points for her taking me on. And she's told me this stuff before. And so I think, like if you're applying to any school, just make sure you have like a broad range of skills. At the end of the day, like if you go to med school or if you become a professor, like having these different skills is really valuable. So always be willing to learn. Like I did like exercise with humans and then I did like molecular biology and, I did like a financial wellness research project in my second year. So I had a bunch of these different skills that I think can make yourself really valuable when applying to different professional schools. So yeah, just learn and like make connections, get experience. I guess like, yeah, the business equivalent or anything else would be like getting experience. So like going to different firms or going to different places and learning these different skills, I think is something you can easily write about in your application or add to your resume. And it's something like at the end of the day, like employers and supervisors want someone who can bring something valuable to their team. So you got to show that you have value, right? Like if you have no skills you bring to the table, then like why would they hire you or bring you on, right? So just be always open to learning new things. And right now, even in my master's, preparing for my PhD, I'm not the one doing the muscle biopsies, and it's not my study. But I always tell the PhD student like I'm down to come and learn and help you with anything you want, just so I can learn these techniques because I eventually want to do it, right? So always be willing to learn. I'm learning how to work with cells right now. So another PhD student in my lab is analyzing white blood cells. And so she taught me how to isolate white blood cells and freeze them and store them away and how to treat them. And so always be willing to learn new skills. And so I think that's very valuable. And, you know, in my lab, a lot of them call me backup boy because I have all these skills and I'm always everyone's back. Like if anyone's sick, I can help them with this and help them with that. So yeah, I think that's something everyone can strive for, just learning all these different skills that show that you have value, basically.
Yeah. So, you know, talking about bringing value, one question I always ask on the podcast is, you know, in 20, 30 years, we come back and we say, Nick is blank, and like your legacy is there. What would you like to be known for in that blank?
Yeah. So I guess for me, like, if we talk about like professional academically, like I think I want people to say, you know, Nick was hardworking. I think, you know, for me, like I was never like the smartest kid growing up. And so, you know, to eventually get to that part, I hope to get to that point where like I'm a professor and I've done research for a while. I want people to know like, oh, Nick was really hardworking. Nick put a lot of work into his research, and that hopefully I contribute something to the scientific literature. And, you know, I've mentored students and made some changes in some of these students' lives. I guess like personally, I hopefully like, you know, Nick is loving. Like I always, you know, want to show love to people. So I want to be remembered as someone who always cared and loved and like, you know, put my friends and family first. So yeah, I guess that's what I want to be remembered as in like 20, 30 years. As corny as that sounds.
Yeah. And, you know, looking forward, you know, aside from, you know, your PhD and being a professor, do you have any other aspirations that we can hear about?
Okay. Yeah. So I guess personally, so I was never the best athlete. I suck at basketball, but I love it. And so I always went to the gym to try like improving, you know, getting stronger, getting faster, getting more explosive. A dream I always wanted to do is I always wanted to dunk. I think I remember you were really athletic. You're on the volleyball. Can you dunk, Nathan?
On a good day. On a good day.
That's pretty sick. But I've always wanted to dunk. I'm 5'9" and I have like really stubby arms, so dunking is like really hard. I've always wanted to do that. So I always spent a lot of time in the gym. And so sorry, this might be a bit of a long story, but basically like I never hit legs. I loved like, you know, hitting upper body. Like when I stopped playing basketball, I just hit arms basically all the time. And out of COVID, I was like, what's a good way to like force myself to hit legs? And I was like, oh, maybe I'll do something called powerlifting. So have you heard? Yeah, so powerlifting is basically competing and doing 3 lifts. So it's like squatting, benching, and deadlifting. And I'm like, okay, like if I try like focusing my training towards powerlifting, then I'm forced to squat and deadlift, and that'll kind of like give me an excuse to hit legs. And so out of COVID, so 2021, I started like doing more powerlifting style training. And I actually have decent leverages for it. So if you're benching, if you have longer arms, it's actually harder because you have to move the bench a longer range of motion. And so I have really short arms, so my bench is like pretty good. And I have really short legs, so I'm pretty good at squatting too. So I guess like aside from being a professor, some aspirations I have is to compete in powerlifting. This year I'm hoping to compete for the first year this year. And hopefully, you know, place like get either like a gold, silver, or bronze medal. Because again, I was never the best athlete. So, you know, I guess like powerlifting is my way of like channeling my competitive nature in some aspects. So I eventually want to compete in powerlifting and, you know, hopefully do well. And like as a side hustle, like I want to like hopefully do like coaching and training. I just don't do it right now because like I haven't competed in a competition yet. So I want to get some like competitions under my belt and then hopefully like coach and train some of these people like on the side as well, because I still love sports and I still love lifting, aside from doing all that research stuff. So that's an aspiration. And for me, like I eventually, like I'm a family guy, so I eventually, you know, want to start a family as well. So yeah, those are some of my aspirations, like hopefully within the next few years that I can hopefully do.
Yeah, love to hear that.
Yeah.
Very specific, very driven. We're wish you the best of luck. We're gonna follow you along that journey, hopefully. Wrapping up, one final question for you. If you could nominate another PET grad or a few, who would it be?
Yeah, so one of my best friends from PET, I think I'd probably nominate him. So his name's Vakash. I don't know if you know him. Yeah, Vakash.
Yeah.
He has a really interesting journey. He also studied kin, but his journey was really crazy. Like he was at Western at first, then he transferred to York. He really wanted to do physio school, and now he's like in London studying physio school. So I think he has a really cool journey as well. One of my friends also as well, like he has a really unconventional journey too. His name is, you probably know. Do you know Ian?
Ian
Wang.
No,
Yeah,
no.
like he has a really cool journey. Like he's not like, it's not really conventional. He's like in music right now. Like he wants to be a teacher, and now he's like doing a lot of music stuff. So I think like, I think you've seen there's like a lot of business people you've had on, some science people, but like he has a really interesting journey as well. I think is really cool to follow along. But I think those two have like really cool like unconventional journeys that aren't as common, which I think would be some cool, pretty cool. Like I know a lot of these guys you've brought on are like either in business or law or like science. So maybe some cool other journeys would be really interesting to see for some people who aren't really interested in that type of stuff.
Yeah, definitely interested in hearing, everyone's story, unique stories. There's no one right way to do things.
Yeah.
That is definitely, the purpose of this page, to share everyone's story, not just the ones that are normal, per se. So wrapping up, do you have any final, words of wisdom, words of motivation for anyone watching?
Yeah, I guess I probably said it a lot, but yeah, just like whatever you want, just work as hard as you can for it, and never stop. Like I think like if you want to be like a doctor, if you want to be a lawyer, if you want to be like an actor, producer, rapper, singer, physiotherapist, anything you want to do, like I think like I do truly believe that anything is possible as long as you work hard for it. There's like this one quote by Kevin Durant. It's like when talent fails to, or it's like, what is it? It's like hard work beats talent when talent fails to work hard, right? So I've always stood by that. I'm always like, you know what? Like you might not be the best at this one area, but as long as you work hard, I do believe that eventually you can do whatever it is you're passionate about. Stole it from Kevin Durant. I guess it's not my own words of wisdom, but yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. We'd love to, see you accomplish all those great things in the future, future Dr. Cheng.
Hopefully, we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone so much for watching. We'll see everyone next week. Peace out.